So this video is a continuation of my discussion of the blended traditional modality that many of you have adopted for the fall, which I like to call blended with rotating cohorts because it's a little bit of a twist on the traditional blended modality that we talk about in the literature and online education. So as you'll recall, this is the kind of default that we use as an example for those of you who are teaching in this mode of what it would look like to have rotating cohorts in a 3-day-a-week course, 3-credit-hour course. One of the questions we ended on in the last video and that we've received a lot is whether this model is what you're sort of stuck with. Do you have to do it this way? Are there other things you can do? And the answer is absolutely. There's a lot of room for flexibility. You do not have to do this. We were just doing this to help those who wanted something as a starting point to think about as they were designing their courses. There are, however, a number of constraints that you have to work within when you're being creative in designing and scheduling your course. And so I want to talk through those constraints first. So the first constraint, which is related to the video on contact hours that I shared, is that you have to design up to 15 hours of engaged activities for your students per credit hour per semester. So if you're teaching a 3-credit-hour course, you need to make sure that however you organize your schedule and however many sessions you have and which weeks, that there is 45 hours of engaged work for your students over the course of the semester. And that engagement can be online or in person. Doesn't really matter. The order, you could have 2 in-person sessions the whole semester. That's fine. But you do need to have 45 hours of engagement. And because you're teaching a blended course, you need to have at least some in-person sessions. Otherwise, it would be a fully online course. One of the things I would say is that, yes, you can be creative about when you schedule these, but I want to be careful about front-loading too much or back-loading too much because our students are taking 5 to 6 courses, which means that it would be extremely overwhelming if a lot of faculty started accelerating their courses, and that would mean that our students would be taking 5 courses with tons and tons of hours of work, which would be difficult for them to keep up with. So what we recommend is you stick with the standard of 3 hours of engaged work per week and 6 hours of independent work per week per 3-credit-hour course. That makes sense to us, and I think you can be creative within that context. The second constraint is pretty obvious, but very important for health reasons, for both your health, the students' health, and our community's health, which is that you should really stick to the social distancing capacity in your classroom. And you need to find that out if you don't know that yet, because it'll have major constraints on what you can do in terms of your scheduling and how many students and which cohorts can meet when. And then finally, one that's not often talked about, but I just want to remind you, is that you're going to have to be mindful of your scheduled class time. So if you want to do synchronous sessions with some of your students, synchronous online sessions with some of your students, it needs to happen during your regularly scheduled class time. But if you're hosting a smaller cohort in person during your regularly scheduled class time, you can't have required synchronous sessions at a different time. So I want you to be mindful of that. The reason you can't have required synchronous sessions at a different time is because this would be a problem for other faculty who are teaching their courses that are already registered at that specific time. So if you know you like synchronous sessions, we have some recommendations about how you might organize your blended traditional course schedule to make sure you can get some required synchronous online sessions in the mix. So here's a good example of something that's different. And this actually came from one of our colleagues, actually. It was a brilliant idea, and so I'm glad they raised the question, because this is a great example of creativity of how you can do basically the same thing, but in a different format. So instead of having your cohorts rotate across the week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, this model has your cohorts rotate across the class period. So you would have your first cohort come for the first 20 minutes on Monday, your second cohort come for the second 20 minutes on Monday, and your third cohort come for the third 20 minutes on Monday. And if you're teaching 2-day a week, you could have your first cohort come for the first 45 minutes, your second cohort come for the second 45 minutes. And so this has a lot of benefits depending on how you teach and how your course is structured. It keeps the sort of consistency for your students. So this is what the student schedule would look like. They'd be meeting 3 days a week for 20 minutes and then 2 hours of asynchronous work online. Because even if you do it this way, they're still only getting an hour of engaged work in the classroom. Even though it's 3 days a week, it's still only an hour. So you still need to design 2 hours of asynchronous engagement for them. But this could work if you think your students need that consistency. It could work if you think it's important for you to do something different on each Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you'd rather just repeat it for all your students, something to consider. And again, you can be really flexible with this and do a lot of different things along these lines. You can tweak this a little bit if you're interested. Now, as I said, some of you may really like synchronous Zoom sessions that you may want to do with all of your students rather than just certain cohorts. And if you're somebody who really likes synchronous Zoom sessions and breakout groups and all of those using Google Docs, etc., you could design a course that's mostly online via synchronous Zoom sessions. Not something we'd recommend doing it all the time, but certainly something you could do, and it could look something like this. You would have the entire class, all 3 cohorts, meeting together during the regularly scheduled class period on a Monday, the entire class meeting together during the regularly scheduled class period on Wednesday. But the reason you can have your entire class together is because you're going to be doing it via Zoom and not in that tiny classroom. And then you could set aside Friday for either in-person session with a smaller cohort, and then the rest of the students would do asynchronous work. And then the following week, you would rotate so that that Friday, it's another cohort that gets to meet with you in person, and then the following Friday, it's another cohort that gets to meet with you in person. So really what you have here is a mostly online course where students, this is from the student's perspective, the students get to meet in person with you every 4 Fridays. And then on the other Fridays, they're just going to be engaging in asynchronous work and working on homework and other assignments. So this could work really well for you too, where students have synchronous sessions 2 days a week, and then either an asynchronous portion on a Friday or a meeting in person on a Friday.